Alright guys, MTech Guy here, and today we're going to take a look at doing a front brake job on the E53 X5. Now then, these X5s, with them being a fairly large heavy car, they love to eat brakes, so if you haven't had to do the brakes on your car so far, it's pretty sure that it'll be coming up sometime in the near future. So what we're doing is changing out the front discs, the front pads, and there's also a wear sensor to change out too, so we'll take a look at that today. Alright, so let's take a look at what parts we're going to need to carry out the job. Okay, so here's what we need to get the job done. Obviously 2 brake discs, one for each side. Brake disc in there, look. And also a set of brake pads. Now you'll also need a brake wear sensor too. I don't have one today, I'm still waiting for it to come in the post. But I just want to get on with the job today, get it done. I'll come back later on and fit that wear sensor, but I'll show you the existing one anyway so you get an idea of what's what with that. So anyhow, that's what you need to get the job done. Let's get into it. Okay, so we'll start off by doing the front lift to start off with. So first up, we'll slacken off all the wheel bolts while the car's still got the weight on the ground. Then we'll jack this corner up, get it up on a jack stand, remove the wheel, take a look at the brakes. Okay, so here we are, I've got the brake disc, the brake caliper. So we'll start off by removing the wear sensor. So there's only one on this side at the front, on the left hand side, there isn't one on the right. So we'll start off by removing that first, and then we'll remove this retaining bolt that holds the disc to the hub there before we remove the caliper. So we'll start off with this now. There's a wee box at the top here, and if you follow the line up to the top there, you can see, let's pop this connector out. We'll undo that, try and do it one-handed here. There we go. And we'll just follow it round, unclip it from the bracket here. Alright, we've got that undone, so you can see we've unclipped the connector there, we followed it down, pulled it out of this bracket here, and then it was retained just behind the bleeder nipple cover there, and then it's just hanging off the pad there for now. We can dispose of that with the pad itself. So next up, we'll remove this Allen bolt, and that takes a 6mm Allen, and you just want to be careful you don't round these out because you'll have a hell of a time getting out otherwise. Now my new discs came with new bolts, so we'll use the new bolts when we come to refit the new discs. Okay, so now we're ready to remove the caliper from the disc itself. So we need to remove the 2 guide pins, one at the top there and one down the bottom just there. So they're removed with a 7mm Allen, but before we do that we've got to take off the retaining clip here. So we'll get that out of the way, we'll get the caliper removed and swung up and out of the way. Okay, so there we are, we've got the caliper up and out of the way. Now I've just rested it up there so we're not putting any strain on this brake hose here. So what I'll do is I'll remove the guide pins and we'll give them a bit of a clean up before we put them back. Put them on one side for now. Okay, so next up, to be able to remove the brake disc itself, we need to remove the caliper bracket, and that's held on by 2 bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, and they take a 16mm socket. So we'll get them bolts out, we'll get the caliper bracket off, and then we're ready to remove the brake disc. Okay, so we've got the caliper bracket off now, and you can see here, just these 4 points here, that's where the pads sort of ride on as they're sliding backwards and forwards. So what we're going to do is give them a good clean up before we put the bracket back on the car, and we'll just apply a tiny bit of grease to them also before we bolt it back to the car. So let's take a look at the caliper up here. Now we're almost ready to fit our new pads, but before we do that we have to push this piston inwards to allow for the extra thickness of the pads and the extra thickness of the rotors. So before we do that, it's worth checking the level in your master cylinder, because if it's pretty well topped off at the moment, pretty high level, what will happen is when you push that back, your master cylinder could overflow a wee bit, so you might have to suck a little bit of fluid out of there. But anyway, when you're ready, you can either get a special tool to push the caliper back, you can use a G-clamp, or you can just do what I'm going to do and just use a pair of grips and just pull that back just slowly. I'll just put the other old pad against there and just push it with the pads on, and then when we're ready, when the piston's back, what we'll do is we'll disconnect the old pad, clip in the new one, and then we're ready to reinstall everything. Alright, you can see I've got the old pad removed now, the piston pushed back in the caliper there, and what I've done is I've just given the face of that piston a good clean, and the same with the caliper bracket down here, these surfaces here, and also across the back there. So that's where the new pads are going to sort of slide against. So what we'll do now is we'll just apply a bit of anti-seize grease to there and on the back of there also. You only want a small amount though, you don't want to be caking it on there, just a small amount, because you don't want it to get on your pads or on your discs or anything, just enough to give it a bit of lubrication so we don't get any squeaks when we get it back together. Okay, so as you can see, got a bit of anti-seize grease just on the end of the piston there. Just watch you don't get it on the boot of the piston because it can damage it over time. And then just on the slide areas of the caliper bracket there. And I've also put some on the outer brake pad on the back of it. Now these do have anti-squeak shims, but I've found over the years that sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So it always helps just to put a little bit of anti-seize on there. Some people agree, some people will disagree, but that's the way I do it from experience, just to avoid any squeaks further down the road. Alright, so what we'll do next before we get too carried away is we need to remove the old disc and get the new one in position, get it bolted up, and then we'll get the caliper bracket back on. Now I did have to give this a few taps with the hammer just to break it free, so we'll take that off now. Get the new one. Make sure the holes are lined up correctly. Then we're ready to reinstall our new Allen bolt. And what we'll do is just give this a little bit of anti-seize there, just to help the next fella out who comes to replace the brakes. Could be me, you never know. Give it a bit of a nip. There we go. Okay, so now the disc's on, we're ready to reinstall our caliper bracket. Okay, so now the caliper bracket's in position, we're ready to refit our brake pads. So there's one to go on the front here and one to go in the caliper. So now we've got the new brake pads and the caliper back in position, so we're ready to refit our guide pins, and I've just given these a clean up with some brake clean. Okay, so there we have it. We've got the new discs on, the new pads, the calipers back in position. All we've got to do now is just pop them plastic caps back on the end of the guide pins. And as luck would have it, the postman's just stopped by and dropped off me wear sensor there just in time, so we'll get that fitted now, the new one, and then we're all finished up on this side. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle, we've just got the anti-rattle clip to go back on the caliper. There we go, so that's that side done. Now I'll move on to the other side. I will not bother filming it because it's pretty much the same, only difference being there's no wear sensor on the other side. Alright guys, well here we have it. We've got the new discs and pads fitted at the front, both sides now. I hope this video helped you guys out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.